In recent years, the world has been turbulent, with regional conflicts constantly erupting, but their causes have all been clear. Yet in world history, there was a war often called the most ridiculous cause ever. That's what we're talking about today, the Pig War. Yes, you heard that right. A showdown between two world powers triggered by a single pig. 1. Background of the war. Let's go back to the 1850s. The location, the San Juan Islands between present-day Washington State and British Columbia, Canada. At the time, Canada was still a British colony. In 1846, the U.S. and Britain signed the Oregon Treaty, setting the boundary at the 49th parallel. But the treaty was incredibly vague. Who exactly did San Juan Island belong to? The U.S. said, the Haro Strait is the boundary. The island is ours. Britain said, no, the Rosario Strait is the boundary. The island is ours. You think countries only go to war over land and resources? No, don't forget what we're talking about today, a pig. On this beautiful island, American settlers were already farming the land, while the British Hudson's Bay Company was raising sheep and pigs. Things were relatively calm. Everything was fairly peaceful until that pig showed up. 2. A conflict sparked by a pig. On June 15, 1859, an American named Lyman Cutlar again found a pig in his garden eating his potatoes. Picture this, a fat pig stuffing itself in the vegetable patch you worked so hard to grow. Could you tolerate that? But why again? Because this wasn't the first time. The pig had come several times before, and Lyman had already warned its owner, British farmer Charles Griffin, more than once. This time, he'd had enough. Lyman grabbed his gun and shot the pig on the spot. Charles, the pig's owner, was furious. He demanded compensation. After all, it was his pig. Lyman initially wanted to keep the peace. He offered an apology and $10. But Charles insisted on $100. Lyman refused, saying, the land is American. Why should I pay for a British pig? The two couldn't reach a deal. So Charles called the authorities. Not exactly. He went to the British troops and demanded a tougher response. 3. From pig to warships. When the British governor of Vancouver Island, James Douglas, heard about it, he thought, how could Britain just lose a pig like this? No way. We're sending a warship. So he dispatched a naval vessel to San Juan Island, ready to defend Britain's honor, and threatened to arrest Lyman on charges of land encroachment and demand compensation. The American residents on the island were terrified. They turned to General William Harney, commander of the U.S. Army's Department of Oregon, for help. Harney already had strong anti-British feelings. He immediately sent Captain George Edward Pickett aboard the USS Massachusetts to San Juan Island, landing 64 soldiers near the British Farms dock at Griffin Bay, claiming they were there to protect American citizens. By the way, this Captain George later became a major general in the Confederate Army and was quite famous during the American Civil War, though his later years were extremely miserable. At this point, things had completely escalated. British Governor James Douglas was furious. Not only did you kill my pig, but now you're trying to arrest my people? He immediately ordered Commodore Jeffrey Hornby to lead 3 warships armed with cannons toward the island and demand the Americans be expelled. Then he sent Admiral Robert Baines with even more troops, 2,140 men and 5 warships carrying 167 guns. The Americans weren't backing down. They immediately reinforced their forces to 461 men and added more artillery. And so, the two sides were at a standoff on the island, with the U.S. camp on the south end and the British on the north. This wasn't your typical diplomatic standoff. This was a showdown over a pig. Luckily, Admiral Robert Baines was the rational one and directly asked Governor James, "Are we really going to go to war over a pig?" He refused to open fire. In fact, the soldiers from both sides got along surprisingly well. The Americans bought drinks for the British, and the British taught the Americans how to play cricket. At night, you could hear both sides singing together around their camps. What kind of war is this? This was more like a get-together. 4. The standoff. After months of tension, news finally reached Washington and London. President James Buchanan and Queen Victoria were stunned. What? We're about to go to war over a pig. At the time, the U.S. was on the brink of the Civil War, and Britain was dealing with the Indian Mutiny. Both governments quickly stepped in diplomatically, joint occupation of the island, 1 camp from each side, no fighting. And so, San Juan Island remained under joint British and American occupation for 12 years. In 1871, both sides agreed to let German Emperor Kaiser Wilhelm I arbitrate the dispute. In 1872, Wilhelm I ruled that the San Juan Islands belonged to the United States, and Britain wouldn't be compensated for the pig. The British troops had no choice but to withdraw, and the U.S. took full control of the islands. After 12 years, the standoff finally ended. Total casualties, 0. The only one who killed in action was that poor pig. Lessons from history. And just like that, the Pig War became #1 on the list of the dumbest wars in history. This wasn't just a strange historical anecdote. It leaves us with 3 truths. 1. Border treaties really need to be written clearly. 2. Don't let your pig wander off and root through your neighbor's potatoes. 3. Sometimes diplomacy works a lot better than cannons. If you visit San Juan Island today, you can still see reconstructed versions of the old camps. It's pretty interesting. Alright, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe to my channel, and share your thoughts in the comments.